Hey guys, it's Lord of the Pogs. What if people didn't die? That's not to say, what if humans were immortal, or what if there was some kind of black magic at play? If someone fell off a skyscraper or got hit by a train, they would still die. But what if the world was exactly the same as we know it, with the least amount of sci-fi and magical elements, but people didn't die of natural causes? Such a scenario might come about if medicine and the society we live in advanced to the point where if someone had a bad heart, it can be fixed or replaced. If someone has cancer, it can be completely eliminated, and everyone would have reliable access to the medical care they need. When or how that would occur aside, what would the world be like today if humans in their natural form simply never died of natural causes and went on living forever? That's assuming that every war fought was still fought, and every case of ethnic cleansing still occurred. The most obvious thing is the population would have exploded. According to the Population Reference Bureau, around 110 billion people have existed on Earth, and according to the CDC, about 93.3% of people die from natural causes. So if people only died from ethnic cleansing, preventable accidents, and in war, there would currently be 102 billion people on Earth. There are already food shortages, so if the world's population were 13 times bigger, that problem would be severely exacerbated. If people were distributed around the world the same as they are currently, the most populated countries would be China with 18.6 billion people, India with 18.4 billion people, and the United States with 4.4 billion people. The United States would have 3 times more people than China does currently. The most populated cities in the world would be Tokyo with 480.8 million people, Delhi with 377.2 million people, and Shanghai with 337.4 million people. New York City would have 114.2 million people, and Los Angeles would have 50 million people. The biggest city in the world right now is Tokyo with 37 million people. So Los Angeles would have almost twice as many people as the biggest city in the world does currently. There wouldn't be enough space for everyone, and the housing industry would face a crisis of unprecedented proportions. The population density in Los Angeles would be 100,000 people per square mile. New York would have 242,000 people per square mile, and there would be over 6 million homeless people in the United States alone. There would probably be mass killings, perhaps even wars, fought over resources. Euthanasia wouldn't be as unheard of in a world where overpopulation isn't a problem of the future, and assisted suicide might be sought by some, especially among people who don't want to live forever. There might even be some kind of end-of-life service, like assisted suicide, but for people who have reached 100 years of age or older and have simply chosen to not go on living. Another possible solution to the problem of overpopulation might be a planning initiative like China had between 1970 and 2021 that included 1 or 2 child limits for most couples, required time intervals between births, and heavy surveillance and stiff fines for noncompliance. Enforcement meant forced abortions for over-quota pregnancies and forced sterilization of women to prevent further pregnancies, which provoked unintended social responses: abuse of women who couldn't produce sons, and parents abandoning their daughters to have more children. Other families retained unwanted children but neglected to register them, the Chinese equivalent of having a social security number, leading to a myriad of other problems. Unregistered children legally don't exist and can't access social services. China's 2000 census estimated that about 0.5% of their population was unregistered. That doesn't sound like very many, but in a country with a population of over a billion, that's 8 million people. There's a lot of debate going on currently about undocumented immigrants. Imagine if there were 29 million undocumented Americans. They were born here, so they can't be deported, but none of them have social security numbers. That could be the reality in a world where people don't die if a one-child policy were implemented as the solution. If no one died of natural causes, then statistically, everyone would eventually die in a preventable accident. Some people might try to avoid it by never leaving the house. If you thought the stay-at-home order in 2020 was bad, try staying at home for the rest of your life in a world where people don't die. But eventually, a catastrophic event like an earthquake or a tidal wave, a fire or a flood, an asteroid strike, a nuclear war, or for the stay-at-home people, one of the many scenarios floated in the Final Destination movies would catch up to everyone eventually, even if it takes millions of years. Most people say, when I die, I hope I go peacefully in my sleep. In a world where people don't die, the only way to die would be in a catastrophe. It would no longer be a matter of if you died in a terrible accident, but when. Finances would be a huge problem. Most people save for retirement that they expect to last for about 30 years. But if nobody died, either that money would run out quick. In a world where people live for millions of years, 30 years would go by pretty fast.
Life moves pretty fast.
Or people would work until they were much older than the current retirement age. It's also possible that people would retire for 30 years, rejoin the workforce when that money dried up, rinse and repeat every 50 years or so. There would generally be no need to write wills because no one would ever be expected to die. That means there would be no passing on of an inheritance to kin until they were killed in an accident or on purpose, which would be seen as much more horrific than it is now because death would be thought of as man-made and ultimately unnatural. Chronic pain might be more painful amidst the thought of having to live with it for thousands of years, and people might be less health conscious. People would probably be less concerned about living lifestyles that can cause heart attacks or lung cancer since they wouldn't die from those things. The AIDS epidemic would still have occurred, but Freddie Mercury would still be alive. He would just suffer from chronic pain for the rest of eternity. The bubonic plague would have still spread throughout Europe in the 14th century. The Spanish flu pandemic would still have occurred in 1918, and COVID would still be a thing, but nobody would have died. Everyone would have just suffered from symptoms until they recovered. The generation gap would be unprecedented in a world where people don't die. A person who turned 30 in 2020 likely only has a fraction of the net worth of someone who turned 30 in 1990. If both had a college education, the one in 1990 would be a homeowner with little to no student debt, whereas the one in 2020 would have an apartment with student loans. A person who turned 30 in 1960 might not have a college education but could still afford a house. Those are generation gap issues that are common to experience today. Imagine running into someone at the grocery store who owned slaves before the American Civil War. Teaching someone who was born before electricity was discovered how to use Facebook. Watching a TV show on a mobile app with someone who attended live performances in the 16th century. Explaining online dating to someone who had an arranged marriage in the 13th century, or telling someone who experienced the Salem witch trials about Harry Potter. According to Scientific American, the human brain has a storage capacity of about 2.5 million gigabytes. That's like having an iPod that can store 3 million hours of movies and TV shows. To use it all up, you would have to leave the TV running 24 hours a day for over 300 years. That's an unheard of amount of storage space. But the exact storage capacity of a memory is difficult to calculate. Even if we could measure the size of a memory, memories that involve more details would probably take up more space. But the human brain isn't infinite. People tend to forget things as they get older. Most of us can't recall details from before we were about 5, and it's not uncommon for older people to forget the things they did as a teenager or in their 20s. The oldest person on record was Jan Kalman, who died in 1997 at age 122. It's unlikely that the human brain has unlimited storage capacity, and it's not known what would happen if that capacity were reached. When a computer's hard drive gets full, it's unable to save new files. If the brain got full, would it be unable to form new memories? We might experience a kind of Alzheimer's where people would retain information up to a certain point in their lives, but not remember the last 50 years and forget things as soon as they happen. A computer can crash if it gets overloaded, but what would happen to the human brain? Would people start losing cognitive function until they entered a persistent vegetative state or fell into a coma? To prevent this from happening, the brain might start deleting the oldest memories to make room for new ones. Imagine not knowing how old you are or where you were born because you've been alive for thousands of years. People might not remember their parents or their own kids. One possible solution to this problem might be a selective memory erasing procedure like the one performed by Lacuna in the 2004 film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. We would have to undergo such procedures regularly and be selective of the memories we wanted erased to make room for new ones. Preparing for retirement might involve having 30 years of memories erased first. The criminal justice system would have to legalize capital punishment, and at some point it might have to do so for less heinous crimes. Prisons would become full of inmates serving life sentences, which would no longer be 15 to 25 years. A life sentence would literally be an eternity. Either some of those inmates would have to be eventually released on parole, we'd have to consistently be building more prisons, or there would have to be more capital punishment sentences to make room for new inmates. If people didn't die, the world would be a much different place in more ways than just more people. Movies like The Green Mile, In Time, and The Age of Aldian have explored the concept of living forever. And I think such an existence would have much more adverse effects, ones we probably can't even imagine. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a tip. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that little bell down in the corner to get notifications on more videos like this one.